Hello. I'm Lindsey Rogerson, as you just heard. I'm a financial journalist. I specialize in regulation and compliance. So I'm reporting on the people that the minister, ex-minister just said he wanted to get rid of, shadow minister rather. Anyway, today we are here to talk about digital identity. And I've got an excellent panel for you. And I'm going to let them briefly introduce themselves in a second and just explain where they fit into this thing called digital identity. So I have Anna Wallace of CFIT. I have Britton, who is the chair of the orchestration. When I hear orchestration, I hear orchestra in my head. I see orchestra in my head and I get confused. So I have Minh Nguyen of Entrust, Julie from Yoti, and we have John Peart from the somewhat bizarrely named Office for Digital Verification, Office for Digital Identity and Attributes. It was the attributes bit that kind of threw me. I thought, so anyway, ladies first.
Right, is this on? Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think technical jargon is an issue when it comes to digital ID. So I think you encapsulated that pretty well. I think when CFIT started on digital company ID, that was a fine thing to say. Now it's digital verification services, but we had to talk about providers within that services. So then we got to a point where it was DVS, PS. I mean, it's quite the alphabet. But I'm Anna Wallace. I'm the chief exec of the Centre for Finance, Innovation and Technology. You may have heard the EST talking about us at the start of the day. We were set up by the Treasury and City of London to really be a neutral convener to support the scaling of financial innovation, and the EST announced today that they're continuing their support for CFIT, which we're very excited about. And we care about this because we just finished a coalition on digital company ID, so that's going to be our perspective. Ez.
Fantastic. Hi, everyone. So, Ez Britton, I'm chair of the Digital Verification Orchestration Task Force on behalf of the City of London. And also through my organisation, Collectively Better, we're providing strategic advisory to that task force, helping them really think about how do we bring together those key stakeholders, take that plan and make it actionable. It's really about taking that impossible concept and making it probable.
Hi everyone, Minh, I'm VP Product at Entrust. Before that, worked for Onfido, a company rooted here for the previous 10 years. And this is a very special moment for me because this is the very room where we celebrated the sale of Onfido to Entrust in this very, very room 2 years ago. So it's good to be back here. Our role in the ecosystem is identity verification. I'll try to stop adding new acronyms into the mix, but we verify identities. We do it across financial services, but also other verticals around mobility, hospitality, but also in the public sector with the UK Home Office, for example. So that's the role we play in the ecosystem, both here, but also in Europe and North America.
Hi, I'm Julie Dawson. I lead on regulatory and policy at Yoti. Yoti was set up back in 2014 and has now set up 23 million reusable digital identity wallets for citizens around the world, about 9 million here in the UK. Now, when I last went to a conference like this and I asked how many people either owned or had seen a digital identity wallet, it was very low. So I don't know how many people in the room here today actually own an ID wallet or have seen one. Wow, we're about treble the number. We're about 10 or so people, so I think we're doing well. Maybe 15 with the panel. So if you look at that as we've set this up as a consumer-focused proposition. And every month we have hundreds of thousands of people choosing to set up a reusable digital ID wallet. And thanks, not in short order, to some of the use cases put forward through the digital identity and attributes, now the DVS trust framework. So things like right to work checks, right to rent checks, DBS checks are things that are already happening in the sector. So about 50 companies delivering north of 2 billion digital verification checks. And then there's also now reusable wallets. So we've set up about 9 million of these reusable wallets. And there are other companies as well in the UK, particularly following the Online Safety Act last year, where people are just using it to prove they're over 18, for example, to access adult content. In the future, maybe more with social media. So yes, delighted to be here today, and delighted also to pass the baton on to John, given his work in building the DVS Trust Framework.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everybody. So my name's John Peart. I'm the Chief Executive for the Office for Digital Identities and Attributes. We're a team that is part of the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and we were set up originally in 2021 to figure out why nobody was using digital identities. And it's something that the UK has attempted to kind of get a grounding in for many years. Many of you will be aware of the National Identity Cards programme that was set up in 2006 and then was shut down by the following government in roughly 2010. We then had a product that you might have heard of or possibly even used called gov.uk Verify, which was intended to be a kind of pan-economy product that would bridge the private and public sector. And the work that we're doing today actually comes from the kind of ashes of that programme, in that we recognise that the best way to unlock economic growth across this country is to have good quality identity proofing, that could be done effectively through technology, but that nobody trusted those products. And so the whole point of our work has been to establish a framework of governance and rules around a new market of what we call digital verification services. Yoti and the Onfido product that Minh mentioned are two of those services that are available today. And the idea is that if people can follow the same rules, if they can have assurance that everybody is following those rules through some kind of independent process, then you can trust them and they can interoperate, and we can interoperate domestically but also globally to make sure that these services are safe and trusted. So that's the work that my team does. We're now on a statutory basis implementing the things in the Data Act Part 2, Data Use and Access Act 2025. And that means that we, on an annual basis, will now review what those rules are for the market, make sure they're set out clearly in the DVS Trust Framework, which is available on gov.uk now. We then establish an independent certification process for making sure those products are actually following the rules when they claim to be. And that process is the same process that makes sure that your car stays on the road and the wheels don't fall off, and that your food is safe to eat, and that your toilet doesn't leak. Those kinds of processes are kind of being mirrored in the digital identity space now to make sure that your data is being safely contained, that we're checking against imposters and all those kinds of bits and pieces. And then the government publishes a register of who's trusted and who's not, that increasingly over the future will be a kind of trust anchor for the UK's digital identity ecosystem, meaning that when a Yoti product tries to interact with an Onfido product, that both Yoti and Onfido can make sure that those services are genuine, and that the kind of data being transmitted between them is of the quality that they claim that it is at. And importantly, the government sees none of that data at all. So we don't know what you're using it for, what data is being exchanged, any of that kind of stuff. We have just made sure that you can choose a trusted service outside in the economy. So that's the work that our team does.
Thank you for explaining that kind of layers that you have put in, which will enable and is enabling everybody else to build off that essential trust bit. Before we leave that, I just wanted to touch a little bit on the public and convincing the public of that trust. And so what else can you do? What else is coming in order to make that point? The fact that you're still here having to explain that the government doesn't see this information, that when you use your identity, you can't be mapped and everything. Sort of that isn't widely understood, as you know from any kind of quick glance through some of the more traditional media. So what's that? What else is? And that is for government. What else can government do to sort of get that across?
Well, so I think a lot of the time these services are complicated to understand, and the language connected to them, as we've just been talking about, is very confused, right? So we talk a lot about digital verification services as the kind of object of regulation that our team deals with. We talk about digital identities as kind of clouds of data, effectively, that can be drawn from to do things, and that's where the attributes bit comes from, by the way. Digital identities, the constituent parts of a digital identity are the attributes. And I think that a lot of the time we, certainly in Whitehall and probably in the sector, get wrapped up in that language in a way that we think that it makes sense to people. It absolutely doesn't. But if you actually sit down and speak to people about the tasks they are trying to do across the economy, and the things that they can have done more quickly and more easily because they've used a digital service, and if you avoid the terminology of digital ID or digital identity or DVS, things become much more useful and much less scary for people. Millions of people in this country have now done digital identity-based right-to-work checks. They don't know necessarily that they've done that, but they've done it using services that are safe and trusted, like Yoti service. I can't remember if Onfido's on the register for that as well, but we've got a list of companies that have been assessed to make sure that the data that's going through those systems is being kept safe, that it's minimizing the data that's necessary to do the transaction, that we're doing anti-imposter checks, fraud checks, all those things. People just expect it to work. And so the kind of work of our team is to try and make sure that Joe Bloggs on the street doesn't have to understand the complexity of the ecosystem that we've created. All they need to know is that if they go and find a product that they believe they trust, that could be Yoti, it could be Onfido, it could be any number of companies that are now in the UK ecosystem, that they know that it's trustworthy and they trust that government has done the right thing to assure that it is safe. And obviously we've got government products as well in this ecosystem that we have also built. So the gov.uk One Login product is the way that government's choosing to allow citizens to access central government services on gov.uk. That service also meets the same rules that the private sector meets, has been certified as doing so. And part of that environment that we want people to create is that there is an interoperable basis upon which everybody can trust that ecosystem, and that you shouldn't have to think about whether or not it's good or not. As long as you can do the thing you need to do, then that's the thing that we're hoping people will bank on. So.
No, thank you. I think personally, and I've read the consultation that is currently out from your department, and we often hear the alcohol example, so if you're in a pub and I think this is especially relevant for young women actually, if you hand over your driving license, somebody can see where you live. The ability to just share what you need, as in that I am over 18, is actually a very good selling point. But the one in the consultation which really resonated with me was the example from Estonia. I remember years ago, sitting as a new mother with my husband, actually saying to us, we have 3 degrees between us and we cannot fill in this form for child benefit. That's showing my age there. Child benefit was still available. The idea that in Estonia, it's literally done in the hospital seamlessly, and then that's your child all the way through. I think there is a huge selling point in terms of the bureaucracy that can be removed from doing this, and I did start to see some of that messaging come through in the consultation, so maybe we'll have a bit more of that in future. If I move on to the kind of, we've got that layer, the people that are using it, so maybe as if I come to you first to talk about this orchestration bit and how it gets going and what that means.
Yeah, so orchestration, fundamentally, it's about having a governance, rules-based coordination layer that facilitates the secure data interchange between the digital identity providers and the relying parties to ensure that there is an actual market that can operate between in the ecosystem. Now we see clearly we've got plenty of digital identity providers, we've got organizations that want to make usage of them, but there is no clear approach, standard that means one bank can use all of the digital identity providers, or an individual can just go, right, this is my identity, it doesn't matter which service I'm signing up to, it will be acknowledged, it will be accepted. So the purpose of a DVO is to be able to put that into position. And the role of the task force is to both identify a core blueprint for what should be a DVO, but also to then put forward and identify those key candidates in the ecosystem, those organizations that could take that role of the DVO, and then to build momentum by bringing together the various stakeholders, whether it's banks, fintechs, some of the regulators, to actually go, yes, we want to get behind these organizations, we recognize that they can take this role, and we want to push this forwards using looking at some of the key use cases that we see. And some have already been mentioned here today, but there are others: onboarding, KYC, verification, re-verification over time. And then you think about, yes, age verification, the others, but then there are plenty of other use cases outside of that space, which I know CFIT has been very, very involved in.
No, thank you very much. If we come to 2 of the actual providers now, and I did check just yesterday, and as of yesterday, there were 62 DVSs on the register, and Minh and Julie are here representing 2 of those. So I'm going to come to you first, Minh. As well as the financial services part, your company is drawing on the contracts that you have for travel verification and right to work checks, etc. So just how has that helped you as you come to now provide and stretch into financial services?
Yeah, so I think the ecosystem, so we all have identities, and the identity that we hold when we cross borders, when we interact with financial services, when we have good family events and we need to disclose all of this, this is a single identity ultimately, but it has multiple attributes, and that's what you're referring to in that cloud of attributes. And so what's interesting here is I see some of the consumer behaviors from financial services around ease of access, zero friction user experience and all of that, being transported into the expectations that we have as citizens when we cross borders and I need an electronic travel authorization. As industry players, it's easy for us to segment all of these use cases, but in terms of expectations and behavior, we're just one person. And on the other hand, the experience that we have from the public sector is the need for inclusion. We need to make sure that everyone has access to public services and is able to travel. And so these are some of the learnings that we're bringing into the financial service world in offering multiple modalities of identity verification across different moments of the life cycle for different parts of the demographics. And so what I really want to share today is this is a wide ecosystem, and the diversity of industry players is part of what makes the ecosystem strong, because we draw from different experiences across the industry. And what I'm looking forward to is seeing how we as an ecosystem can continue and push and keep the momentum of what we've already built over the last years and really try and sort of break that cold start problem on building the network that allows verification providers, relying parties, and members of the public to all use their identity online in a safer way.
Thank you. Julie, could you perhaps touch on as well sort of because obviously you don't just provide identities in the UK, and so maybe draw on that experience of operating in other markets as well?
Sure, yes. So we've been looking at the development and evolution of trust frameworks in different parts of the world. So specifically, for example, in Canada, we're very hopeful that there might be in the future even more alignment across the trust frameworks, because what would be ideal would be not only for us as citizens, but for relying parties to know that you can use your ID in different sectors and in different countries. So we've been involved in the development of DIAC in Canada for a long period. We've had long-standing discussions through with Australia, and we would really like in the future to do more in terms of alignment with UD wallets. And looking across the sort of different areas, absolutely we look at the transactional identification, where people just want on a one-off basis to prove either age or identity. But what we're seeing is about 25% of people where they're needing to redo something. Be that somebody in their late teens and 20s that's changing jobs, gig economy, a couple of times a year. They need a reusable ID wallet. People using this for age, 25% are choosing either a reusable wallet or a tokenized form of age verification. Then you move to e-signatures, uplifted with either age or identity. That could be for the legal sector, property sector. It could also be people uploading content. Are they the right age? Have they given consent to be in that content? Then we move to things like verified credentials. So you know I'm Julie, you know I'm over 18. Maybe then you want to know that I really am employed by British Gas and I really ought to be calling you. Or that I really am the person that should be at your board meeting on a verified video call. So staff identity, business identity, volunteer identity, and other credentials about an individual are really vital going forward. So we're hopeful things like qualifications will be things coming forwards that we will see more of. And then this has to fit into agentic flows. There will be businesses that will be looking at how can this fit into their flows in the future, be it for that member of staff, be it that for the company, be it for an individual for KYC, AML. So we were all hugely encouraged to see the updated MLR guidance, and we live in hope for the updated MLC, as in mandatory licensing conditions for alcohol, which John and I have a long-standing joke about. We've both got something chilling in the freezer or fridge for when that comes through, because 50% of the UK population purchase either alcohol or some nicotine good on a weekly basis. And that, for everyone in this room, is a really big trigger point, because that will mean that your customers and clients will be doing this in their outside of work daily lives. And a bit like when we all tapped our Oyster cards for the first time or tapped a debit card, people will start to get used to, this is helpful for me in my everyday life.
No, thank you very much. And you mentioned something there which I'm going to come on and ask Anna to talk about. And that's obviously, we don't just have identities as individuals. If you run a business, your business has an identity. And this is specific, very important for the financial services industry. You know, if you look at the number of business bank accounts out there, and, you know, and so Anna, I know that CFIT is testing, or about to test, a digital business identity in the FCA sandbox. So exciting. Talk us through it.
Yeah, I mean, just to start, I guess our perspective, I mean, there's two things. The first is, you know, and I think as mentioned it, and others did, Minh in particular, that, you know, this is a growth sector. This identity verification is a growth sector. It's core to fintech. You know, that's why we're here this week about growing fintech. And there is huge potential in this market. And the numbers are, you know, 2 billion in terms of revenues annually from this market. It's a growing market, but it's not quite at scale. And that's, I think, where CFIT begins to get interested in things where, you know, we have lots of innovation, there's lots of new companies, there is productivity, there is growth, but it's not quite, you know, not everyone's using it. It's not part of our standardized process. And the other side of it was really SMEs. And they are really, you know, the drivers of economic growth in the UK. So we looked at SMEs and how they could use something called the company digital ID. And what was really, you know, for us, first we looked at the market opportunity. So we have the ID providers, but actually is there a willingness to use this and a trust to use this? And it's a very different story, actually. You know, SMEs are willing to pay for this. They see the use in it, and we published a report on market opportunity. So here's an area that we can really support and encourage. And we are very grateful. You know, we have seen the government over the last few months give greater clarity on what their role is going to be in ID verification, because I think without that uncertainty can stagnate investment and progress. And so I think we're going in the right direction, and ministers are meeting with industry and just ensuring that what they propose is helpful for them and for their growth trajectory and gives them the certainty they need. But we've been talking about relying parties, which I find is quite a coy way. I know it's the technical term, but what we really mean is banks. Is that right? Are we talking about banks? Okay. And banks are incredibly important, right, for the scaling of this. They have to accept this. They are risk averse. I'm an ex-regulator. Part of the reason why they're risk averse is what we did, and that's why, you know, I set up the sandbox a very long time ago to really support the scaling of innovation in markets. And one of the visions that we had at that point is we would have a multi-party trial. You know, it wouldn't just be one company trialing something, but we would actually have multiple parties trialing a whole ecosystem. And that's why we're really excited at CFIT that it's you know, it's a CFIT trial, but it's not really. It's CFIT acting as a neutral convener to de-risk the testing of company digital ID amongst multiple parties, including 2 banks, one traditional bank, one slightly more disruptive bank, with the help of many other parties. And that's the interesting part. It does take many parties for this ecosystem to work. So we're also really excited, the announcement by the City of London today, which obviously has been in the works for a while, that they are going to play a role in supporting that orchestration layer, because, you know, CFIT, through their coalition, developed a trust and governance framework, a market opportunity framework, which will support, you know, which this MVP through the sandbox is the living, breathing example of it. But we know to scale it beyond that trial, it really does need that orchestration. It does really need the standards from government as well. So yeah, we're really excited that this is taking place, and watch this space.
We will indeed watch this space. The clock is flashing red, so I'm aware we're almost at time. But I just wanted to say again about the numbers that have been bandied around to get if digital ID can work. And this is just specific for the financial services industry. So, you know, cutting banks' KYC checks in the time it takes to do them by 50%. Business onboarding could be 60% faster. You know, the cost in terms of fraud reduction, is apparently, huge, and annual bank compliance costs, because it makes it easier, cutting them by about 2 billion as well. So there is a huge incentive for the industry to embrace this and get it right. But as you say, it's got to be that trust bit. Just before we go, I did want to just quickly come back to Minh and Julie, because I know that you both feel that we can learn specifically from the way the EU has mandated acceptance, not use. So I just want to give you the opportunity just to quickly talk about that.
Yeah, I think you captured it. But what I'm really excited by is seeing how we can break what I call the cold start problem, which in a lot of platform and tech companies, you have relying parties, banks, financial services. On the one hand, you have consumers, citizens on the other hand. And how do you make sure that you create the ecosystem that is rich enough, that there's enough financial services accepting the form identity, and on the other side, enough of the consumers and citizens with that form of identity. And the excitement that we have with the EU markets is the EU mandating the acceptance for financial services of digital IDs and starting to deploy that as a way to trigger and kickstart that ecosystem. So we are working with a large number of financial services in helping them transition to that new regime coming up very, very soon. And that's something I find that we could potentially learn from and see how we can build an ecosystem that could connect to the approach.
I mean, I think what's interesting, and we were discussing about this earlier, that there is now a clear roadmap after the February guidance with the money laundering regulations, that there are quite a few other sectors, for example, gambling, potentially property, I'm sure crypto and others, where now they see that this could fit into their landscape. So I'm hopeful we're on the roads, and with the information gateway coming forwards, that there will be more opportunities. But what we absolutely would like to get to is the parity of acceptance, that people don't think you always have to have that physical document. And as well as financial services, it's utilities, telcos, etc., health. That's the flip of the model. We've got to see how we can make it work in the UK. And actually, the simplest things, like for the last few years, every UK cinema has accepted that you could use a +15. Rather than sending your teen to the cinema, they can actually take, for instance, their Yoti and just share a 15+ credential. So in the meantime, we have to be imaginative, creative, and find other ways through this, this maze. But absolutely been tremendous, the work of CFIT, and also Innovate Finance has done a huge amount with Ez and others, looking at how we can encourage the sector to see, how we can all work together to make this come through in the UK.
Thank you. With that, we have been warned to wrap up. So thank you very much to my panel. Please give them a round of applause.